Look at any major American city built before 1920. What do you see? Columns, domes, pediments, classical proportions, Greco-Roman architecture everywhere. Not just a few buildings, thousands of them. State capitals, federal courthouses, post offices, libraries, banks, museums, train stations, all built during the same 40-year period, 1870 to 1910, all in the exact same architectural language, as if following the same blueprint, the same design principles, the same classical vocabulary perfected 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece and Rome. The official explanation is straightforward. It was an architectural movement, the Beaux-Arts style, inspired by the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, a deliberate choice to evoke democracy and Republican ideals through classical architecture. This makes perfect sense. It's documented. It's taught in architectural history classes, it's accepted scholarship, but I want to show you something about the timing, the scale, the coordination, and let you decide if the official explanation fully accounts for what we're seeing, because the numbers are remarkable. Let me start with what's documented beyond dispute. Between 1870 and 1910, America built an unprecedented number of monumental public buildings in the neoclassical style, state capitals. Let's start with specifics. Texas. The design competition was announced in 1881. 8 architects submitted 11 different designs. Elijah E. Myers of Detroit won. Construction started January 1882, completed May 1888. 6 years to build one of the largest state capitals in America. Pink granite from Granite Mountain. The dome stands 308 feet tall, 7 feet taller than the U.S. State capitol. Perfect classical proportions, Corinthian columns, elaborate pediments, hand-carved details throughout. Here's what bothers me about the timeline. Myers was fired in 1886, 2 years before completion. Chicago architect Gustav Wilke finished it using Myers' original plans. The project continued seamlessly despite changing architects mid-construction. And Myers wasn't just working on Texas. The same man designed Michigan's state capitol in the 1870s, then Texas in the 1880s, then Colorado's in the 1890s. 3 massive state capitals, 3 different states, hundreds of miles apart, all with remarkably similar classical designs, domes, columns, rotundas, nearly identical proportions. How did one architect coordinate construction across multiple states simultaneously using 1880s communication and technology? Iowa's state capitol took 15 years, 1871 to 1886. But the result is architectural marvel. 5 domes, the only 5-domed capital in America. The central dome covered with tissue-thin sheets of 23-karat gold that can be seen for miles. The building uses stone from 6 different sources. Iowa limestone for the foundation, ore-colored granite cut from glacial boulders gathered from Iowa prairies, Missouri sandstone for the exterior, elaborate columns, handsome cornices, decorative capitals. The exterior is entirely stone. The pediment over the front entrance features allegorical sculpture. 6 Corinthian columns support it. The interior features marble, elaborate paintings, detailed moldings, all built between 1871 to 1886 using horses and hand labor. Kansas began in 1866, but the serious construction happened later. North and south wings built in 1883. The dome and roof contracted in 1889, completed in 1890. The foundation required excavating 25 feet deep. Workers hit what they thought was a spring, moisture seeping from the Kansas River into bedrock. A crack from foundation settling was repaired in 1890. The building uses more than 300,000 square feet, inspired by classical architecture. Original plans called for a fountain in the first-floor rotunda, sculptures in the pediments, and a large statue of Ceres, Roman goddess of vegetation, atop the dome. Minnesota's capital finished in 1905, designed by architect Cass Gilbert. The dome is the second largest self-supported marble dome in the world. Only St. Peter's Basilica in Rome is larger. The building cost $4.5 million, an enormous sum in 1905. The exterior uses Georgia marble. The interior features marble from around the world, elaborate paintings, massive rotunda, perfect classical proportions that rival anything in Europe. Pennsylvania's capital completed in 1906, often called the most beautiful state capital in America. The dome was directly modeled after St. Peter's Basilica. Over 100 rooms of lavish interior decoration, murals, sculptures, ornate details throughout. President Theodore Roosevelt attended the dedication. He called it the handsomest building I ever saw. These are just examples. Many other states built classical capitals during the same period. Wisconsin, California, Colorado, Montana, Idaho, all during the same 40-year window, all in classical style, all requiring sophisticated architectural knowledge and master craftsmanship. Now add federal buildings. This is where the scale becomes staggering. The office of the supervising architect was created in the Treasury Department in 1852. Its explicit purpose? Design federal buildings across America in a unified classical style to project federal symbolic presence. Think about that phrase, federal symbolic presence. The government wanted buildings that looked authoritative, permanent, connected to classical tradition. James Knox Taylor served as supervising architect from 1897 to 1912, 15 years. During that time, he personally designed hundreds of federal buildings, not dozens, hundreds. Post offices in small towns, courthouses in medium cities, custom houses in ports, all following classical design principles, all using similar proportions, columns, pediments. In towns across America, places that had never seen classical architecture suddenly had buildings that looked like they belonged in ancient Athens or Rome. The 1893 Columbian Exposition in Chicago accelerated everything dramatically. Nearly 200 buildings constructed for the fair in just 2 years. The vast majority designed in Beaux-Arts style. The exposition was nicknamed the Great White City. Millions of Americans visited. They'd never seen anything like it. Classical facades everywhere, grand columns, ornate pediments, domes, elaborate sculptures. Architects were inspired. City leaders were impressed. Citizens wanted buildings like that in their towns. Congress responded by appropriating massive funds for federal construction. The Tarsney Act passed in February 1893, just before the exposition opened. It allowed federal buildings to be designed by private architects through design competitions rather than only by the supervising architect. The stated reason? Private architects would produce better designs at lower costs. The result? An explosion. Architects across America competed to design federal buildings in classical style. Cities requested grand structures. Congress funded them. Denver's federal building is a perfect example. For years, Denver had an old, modest federal building. In 1908, Congress finally appropriated funds for a replacement. The project cost $1.9 million, equivalent to about $60 million today. The New York architectural firm Tracy, Swartwout, and Litchfield won the design competition. Construction began in 1910. The building opened in January 1916. Classical design, grand scale, elaborate details. For a city that barely existed before 1870. Louisville's post office, courthouse, and custom house. Completed in 1933, later than most, but still in neoclassical style. Cost $3 million during the Great Depression. Designed by acting supervising architect James A. Wetmore. Neoclassical style was still the most common for federal architecture even in the 1930s. Why? Because that's what federal buildings were supposed to look like. But it's not just courthouses and post offices. Train stations, too. Union Station in Washington, D.C. Opened 1907. Beaux-Arts masterpiece. White granite. Vaulted ceilings inspired by Roman baths. Elaborate sculptures. Perfect classical proportions. Grand Central Terminal in New York. Opened 1913. Another Beaux-Arts monument. Massive facade with classical columns. Elaborate interior spaces. Or astronomical ceiling in the main concourse. Michigan Central Station in Detroit. Opened 1913. Classical architecture. 18-story tower. Grand waiting room with Corinthian columns. Built to rival the great European train stations. These weren't modest functional buildings. They were monuments. Classical temples, reimagined for modern use. All built during the same brief historical period. All following the same architectural principles developed 2,000 years ago. This is documented, photographed, verified. Construction records exist. Architectural drawings exist. Cost estimates exist. The official explanation is architectural fashion. America wanted to project power, permanence, and connection to classical Republican ideals. European models were prestigious. The Beaux-Arts School in Paris trained architects in classical design. American architects studied there, brought the style home. This makes complete sense. It's logical. It's supported by evidence. But let me show you the pattern that bothers me. The timing is remarkably concentrated. 1870 to 1910, 40 years. That's when the vast majority of America's neoclassical monumental architecture was built. Before 1870, scattered examples. The U.S. Capitol itself was the main model, started in 1793, expanded in the 1850s. Some early state capitals, but relatively few buildings. After 1910, the style declined. By the 1920s to 1940s, Art Deco and other modern styles took over. By the 1950s to 1970s, brutalism and modernism dominated. But during that 40-year window from 1870 to 1910, classical architecture exploded across America in a way that never happened before or since. Why that specific window? The official answer is the Beaux-Arts movement, architectural education, the 1893 exposition, national pride during rapid expansion and industrialization. All true, all documented. But here's what I find remarkable. The same architects designed buildings in multiple states simultaneously. Myers designed capitals in Michigan, Texas, and Colorado. Same design language, same proportions, same classical vocabulary. Federal buildings across the country looked nearly identical because the supervising architect's office used standardized designs. Same columns, same pediments, same layouts, thousands of buildings, built during the same 40 years in cities that had no prior connection, following the same design principles, using the same architectural language. Is this simply architectural fashion spreading? Or does the scale and coordination suggest something more? Let me be very clear about what I'm claiming and what I'm not claiming. I'm not claiming these buildings are ancient. Construction records exist. Photographs document the building process. Workers, materials, costs, all documented. I'm not claiming some hidden civilization built them. Architects are known. Construction firms are known. The buildings were built when records say they were built. What I'm asking is this: does the official explanation of architectural fashion fully account for the remarkable coordination, timing, and scale? Because architectural fashions don't usually produce thousands of nearly identical buildings across an entire continent in just 40 years. Architectural movements typically spread gradually, unevenly, with regional variations, different interpretations, slower adoption in remote areas. But America's neoclassical explosion was remarkably uniform, from Texas to Michigan to Colorado, from small-town post offices to state capitals. The same classical language, the same proportions, the same design elements, all during the same brief period. Let me show you the correlation that nobody wants to discuss. Maps from the 1700s and early 1800s show Tartaria, or Tartary, as a vast territory spanning much of Asia, documented on maps by major cartographers, not disputed. When does Tartaria disappear from maps? Roughly 1850 to 1900. When does America's neoclassical building explosion happen? 1870 to 1910. When do cities worldwide raise their streets and bury original ground floors? 1850 to 1900. When do old buildings get demolished and replaced with modern structures? 1850到1900. The same 50-year historical window. Is this coincidence or pattern? I can't prove it's pattern. Correlation doesn't prove causation. These could be completely independent developments. But the timing is remarkable, and the scale is unprecedented. Let me describe what these buildings look like, because the architecture itself raises questions. Massive granite blocks, precisely cut, perfectly fitted. Some stones weighing tons, moved into place with 1880s technology, horses, hand tools, primitive cranes. Columns that rival anything in ancient Greece or Rome. Corinthian capitals with dozens of individually carved acanthus leaves, not molded, hand-carved. By stonemasons in America in the 1880s, domes that required sophisticated engineering. The Texas State Capitol dome is taller than the U.S. Capitol, built in 1888, cast iron framework. Granite exterior, perfect proportions. Interior rotundas with murals, frescoes, sculptures, often depicting classical mythology, Greek gods, Roman heroes, allegorical figures representing virtues. Why? If these buildings house American government functions, why fill them with imagery from ancient Greece and Rome? The official answer is symbolism. America modeled its republic on classical precedents. Roman Senate, Athenian democracy, using classical architecture, connected America to those ideals. Makes sense, completely logical. But walk through these buildings, stand in the rotundas, look at the craftsmanship, the precision, the scale, and ask yourself, does this look like 19th century construction? Or does it look like buildings from a different era, repurposed for modern use? I'm not claiming to know. I'm asking you to look. The official explanation says different architects independently chose similar classical designs because the style was fashionable. But examine the similarity. State capitals from different architects, different decades, look remarkably uniform. Domes, columns, pediments, classical proportions. Post offices from Maine to California follow the same design templates, because the supervising architect's office used standardized plans. But why standardize to that degree? Why require such uniformity? The official answer is efficiency. Standardization reduced costs, projected federal authority, created recognizable government buildings. True? Documented? Makes sense. But the result is thousands of buildings that look like they were built from the same blueprint, during the same brief historical period. Here's another question nobody asks. Where did the skilled labor come from? These buildings required master stone masons, skilled carvers, expert craftsmen who understood classical proportions, workers who could execute Corinthian capitals, decorative friezes, precise moldings, not simple construction labor, highly specialized skills that took years to develop. The official explanation is European immigration. Craftsmen from Italy, Greece, France brought classical training to America. built up American workforce. This is documented. Immigration records exist. Italian stonemasons did work on many buildings, but the scale still bothers me. Thousands of buildings, tens of thousands of skilled workers needed, all trained in classical architecture, all available during the same 40-year period. Where was this massive pool of classically trained craftsmen before 1870? And where did they go after 1910? The standard answer is they existed, did the work, then the style changed and they adapted or retired. Maybe that's sufficient. Maybe the immigration explanation fully accounts for it. But the numbers seem remarkable. The skill level seems extraordinary. The coordination seems unprecedented. Let me show you something else. Many of these buildings were built remarkably fast. The Texas state capitol took 6 years, 1882 to 1888. A massive structure with elaborate details, hand-carved stone, custom ironwork. Iowa's capitol took 15 years, 1871 to 1886, 5 domes, elaborate interiors, thousands of architectural details. For comparison, medieval cathedrals took generations. Modern skyscrapers with power tools and modern equipment still take years. But America built thousands of elaborate classical buildings in just decades using 19th century technology. The official explanation is American efficiency, motivated workforce, available funding, modern, for the time, construction techniques, though still primarily horses and hand labor, documented, reasonable, logical, but the speed is impressive. The output is staggering. Here's what I think might be happening, and I'm presenting this as one possible interpretation, not as proven fact. What if some of these buildings already existed? What if they were inherited from a previous architectural tradition? What if the construction documented in the 1870s to 1910s was actually restoration and repurposing? This would explain the remarkable uniformity, the sophisticated craftsmanship, the classical knowledge, the speed of construction. If you're restoring existing structures rather than building from scratch, the timeline makes more sense. The skill level makes more sense. The coordination makes more sense. But this is speculation. I acknowledge that openly. The documented evidence says these buildings were constructed during the dates claimed. Construction photographs exist for many buildings. Records detail material purchases, worker payments, construction progress. So either A, the official explanation is correct. Architectural fashion driven by Beaux-Arts movement, accelerated by 1893 exposition, executed by immigrant craftsmen, produced thousands of similar classical buildings in 40 years through conventional construction. Or B, something else was happening. Some buildings may have existed before official construction dates. Some construction may have been restoration. Some architectural knowledge may have come from inherited buildings rather than purely from European training. I can't prove B. The documented evidence supports A, but the pattern raises questions, the timing raises questions, the scale raises questions. And here's why this matters. If thousands of sophisticated classical buildings were built in America during 1870 to 1910, that's one narrative. America as rising power, projecting strength through classical architecture, building an empire. If thousands of sophisticated classical buildings existed before 1870 and were repurposed during that period, that's a different narrative. America inheriting architectural tradition, renaming buildings, rewriting construction dates, claiming achievements. Which narrative is true? The official historical record says the first one. Buildings were built when documents say they were built. But the physical evidence, the craftsmanship, the uniformity, the scale, the timing, makes me wonder if the second narrative deserves consideration. I'm not asking you to believe anything. I'm asking you to look. Next time you visit a state capitol, or a historic post office, or a classical courthouse, look at the stonework, the columns, the proportions. Ask yourself, does this look like it was built in 1885 by workers using horses and hand tools? Or does it look like something older, something more sophisticated, something that required knowledge and skills we're told didn't exist in 19th century America? The official answer is yes, it was built in 1885, and American craftsmen were that skilled. Maybe that's true. Maybe the immigration of European craftsmen fully explains it. Maybe architectural training in America reached that level. Maybe the Beaux-Arts movement inspired that much construction in that short a period. But consider the alternative. What if maps showing Tartaria weren't wrong? What if that civilization produced classical architecture across vast territories? What if, when Tartaria disappeared from maps during 1850 to 1900, its buildings didn't disappear, they were relabeled? What if America's neoclassical explosion wasn't construction, it was appropriation? I can't prove this. Historical records contradict it. Construction documentation exists, but the correlation bothers me. Tartaria disappears 1850 to 1900. Classical buildings appear 1870 to 1910, same time frame. Streets get raised and bury original ground floors 1850 to 1900. Classical buildings get constructed 1870 to 1910. Same time frame. Old maps get replaced with modern maps 1850 to 1900. Old buildings get new construction dates 1870 to 1910. Same time frame. Is this coincidence or systematic? The standard answer is coincidence. Multiple independent developments, architectural fashion, urban modernization, cartographic improvement, all happen to occur during the same historical period. Maybe that's sufficient. Maybe no coordination needed. Maybe it's just how history unfolded. But the pattern is undeniable. The timing is undeniable. The scale is undeniable. Make your own conclusions. Look at the evidence yourself. Visit these buildings. Examine the craftsmanship. Study the timelines. Is it architectural fashion that produced thousands of identical classical buildings in 40 years? Or is it something else? Something we're not supposed to question? Something that requires rewriting what we think we know about 19th century America? I'm not telling you what to think. I'm showing you the pattern and asking you to consider it. The official explanation exists, well documented, taught in universities, accepted by scholars. The alternative interpretation exists, less documented, more speculative. Questioning official timelines, which makes more sense. You decide. But whatever you decide, you have to account for the evidence. The physical, visible, undeniable evidence standing in cities across America. Thousands of classical buildings, built in 40 years, using 19th century technology. Requiring skills, we're told, were rare. Exhibiting uniformity, we're told, was coincidental, all during the exact same period when Tartaria disappeared from maps. When streets were raised and buried ground floors. When Old World was replaced with New World. The official story says these are unrelated developments. Architectural fashion, urban modernization, cartographic improvement, all independent, all coincidental. Maybe that's true. Or maybe there's a pattern we're not seeing, a connection we're not making, a story we're not being told. These buildings weren't designed to be basements. The buried windows weren't designed to be underground. And these classical buildings, with their perfect proportions, sophisticated engineering, master craftsmanship, they weren't designed to look old. They were designed to look eternal, permanent, unquestionable, maybe because they are.